This video was brought to you by the Loud House Wiki, responsible for giving us all of the images and information needed for each episode and character. Please check them out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
Kick it.
Hello, Yoshi Players. This is Yoshi Player here, and today I am joined by.
What up? It's Andrew Brauer. I'm a very close friend of Yoshi's. You might not see a lot of videos from me, but I'm working on some stuff. I've worked on the Sticks movie with him, and I also voiced the villain of that movie as well. So now I'm here to do a video with Yoshi.
Yep, and I appreciate all the work you did for the Sticks movie. Okay, so today we're gonna be doing something a little bit different. It's sort of like Let's Tackle, sort of, and Let's Discuss also. Today we're talking about the first season and most things to do with the Nickelodeon show called The Loud House. And the reason we're doing this is because we both have a lot of very interesting things to say about this show, and because it's become one of my favorite shows of all time. It probably not in the top five, but there are so many things in this show that really interested me to check it out.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the best new cartoons of the year, and easily one of the best things Nickelodeon has put out in almost a whole decade for sure. It's pretty surprising that this show has kind of become something that I've really grown to just get more into, if you want to say it like that.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so so in this video we're going to be discussing how we found out about the show, our top five favorite episodes, top five no bottom five episodes, the episodes we hated the most, and our top five favorite characters. So we're only going to be discussing about season 1 because season 2 hasn't finished yet. We might do a video on season 2 at some point, but I don't know when that will be. But anyway, so
Uh,
hmm?
yeah, from what I was just gonna say that apparently it's rumored that season two probably won't be going back till February, which that's fine by me. We have so many episodes that I honestly don't mind.
Wait, season 2 is coming back in February? I didn't know.
That's what I've heard. Apparently, there's something on the IMDb page that says like there's an episode coming up in February, but that could be false. So I don't know.
Well, it wasn't on Wikipedia, so. But again, I don't entirely trust Wikipedia. So, alright, so I'll start this off by saying, so Andrew, how did you discover or hear about The Loud House before it came out?
Well, I found out about this show through I can imagine what other people have heard about the show through online. People were discussing this show. They were saying like, "Oh, it's like a really good show," and I was like, "All right, I'll check it out." I saw couple episodes on TV. I was like, "All right, this is actually not bad. This is actually pretty solid." Then I kind of like went online to see more episodes of it because I was curious about it. I saw like the first whole season, and I was like, "All right, I get why a lot of people really like this show. I'm gonna stick with it." I mean, I never even watched Nickelodeon anymore. It probably ever since I started high school, I was like, yeah, I'm not into this, but thanks to word of mouth, I heard about this show.
Yep, so how I found out about it, I suppose some people are like, why were you watching Nickelodeon? One day I was just watching Nickelodeon. They were holding some of their old Nicktoons, and who can never enjoy the old Nicktoons? I was just watching them, having a good time, and then before I think it was an old episode of SpongeBob, they showed an ad for the Loud House, and I was like, oh, so they're making a new show. And my initial impressions of the show was, oh boy, this is gonna be terrible. But then when I went online to hear what everybody else had to say about it, I was like, oh, so a lot of people are actually really excited about it. And then sometime in April, I believe they released 4 episodes on the Nickelodeon website. I checked them out. I was kind of mixed on them, but once the show actually came out, I said, you know what? I'll give it a chance. I'll watch more episodes, see how it goes. Saw most of the episodes from the first season. I was honestly impressed, even though there were still a few episodes that were duds. But when the show was good, it was really good. Like, I was surprised by how this show managed to turn out.
Yeah, I was too. It honestly it surprised me that this ended up on Nickelodeon because when you think of a show like this and you think of Nickelodeon, you think like gross humor and you think like whatever SpongeBob's doing right now. I know you said that the newest episodes of SpongeBob are great, but at this point now, I'm a 20-year-old man. I have no purpose for SpongeBob anymore.
Yeah, now that the show has come out, I probably won't give as much attention to SpongeBob anymore because now that this show has come out, I can focus more attention on this because I think it has a higher chance of succeeding more than SpongeBob's doing right now. In
Well,
fact, the
it's a
show.
fan
Hmm?
it's a become a fan favorite now. It's become I think it like from I think I heard it from somebody. It like I think unseated what SpongeBob had in viewers from what I heard.
So does that wait? So you mean the show got more viewers than SpongeBob?
Yeah,
Oh
that's from what I
wow,
heard.
that's
Yeah.
actually incredible because that means the Loud House might actually have a chance of trumping SpongeBob when it comes to views and ratings. Because if it does, it'll probably end up becoming Nickelodeon's most popular show now, and that's good because even though
Uh,
I said before that SpongeBob's getting better, there's no way it has a chance of trumping the Loud House because it just has so many good content that you can't just say that SpongeBob is better. And I'm not gonna sit here and ignore all those trash episodes of SpongeBob. The Loud House is here. It's become a great show. Glad I saw it, and I'm glad it's trumping SpongeBob.
yeah, and the fandom for the show is insane. There's so many supporters behind this. But while I'm glad the show is doing successful, I am somewhat worried about how it's going to continue on. I don't want to go down the same path that SpongeBob or the Fairy Odd Parents have, where like they basically just won't end because apparently there's still people who enjoy the show, I assume.
Yeah, but to be fair, at least the creator of the show is still going to be working on the next two seasons, so that's something.
That's true. I I just hope that it's a show where it has a proper run and it manages to not overstay its welcome. Let's just say that.
So anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about our top five favorite episodes. So I'll go with my number one choice, and then you do your number one, and we kind of take turns of talking about them. So does that sound good?
Okay. Okay, it sounds good.
All right. So for season one, my number one favorite episode. Um, to be honest, I don't really know. I mean, okay, my number one favorite, it would have to be. I know some people would disagree with me on this, but my favorite episode is Butterfly Effect. And I know some people will be like, oh, well, that's a bad episode because of all the bad things that happens to the characters. And that is true, but remember, the whole thing was just in Lincoln's fantasy. He imagined the stuff was happening, so it wasn't entirely true. So, and the changes that happens to the sisters and is actually quite interesting because some of them turn out somewhat dramatically, some of them turn out funny, and overall, I have to say, it was quite an enjoyable episode. And it was it was a pretty good twist too. I thought the whole thing was real until you found out it was just imagination. So I know some people will disagree with me on saying Butterfly Effect is my favorite episode, but that's just my opinion. And if you have your different opinions, that's fine.
I mean, to be honest, Butterfly Effect is one of those episodes that an interesting idea for it, but I kind of thought it blew way out of proportion the second half because once the second half came out, I was like, I already know what's going to happen. This is all in his head, and yeah, that was. I didn't mind the episode. I think I know there's some people that don't really like the episode. I think it's an okay episode. That's really kind of like dropped quality by the second half, and I was like, it's an all right episode. But I get why you do like it. I understand.
Okay, so what about your favorite episode of season one?
For me, I'm going to pick Project Loud House, and the reason why is because if you're looking for a more perfect episode for an introduction, like if you're new to the show and you have no idea like what's going on, check out this episode because I definitely like the idea. I always enjoy like a plot line where it involves like one character trying to like everybody ready. I've seen this before in various of their like sitcoms and other comedy shows, and I definitely like how it's executed here because it shows off the personality of all the characters that are involved, or more specifically, all the sisters to go what goes on there. I liked the progression that was going on. I thought it was unpredictable. I liked how at the end the sisters they realized like, oh, Lincoln was doing all of this just to try and get all of us ready. He actually does care. We should return the favor. I liked how the outcome was, and I didn't really mind. I yeah, I liked how the whole episode came together. I think it's a perfect introduction episode, and yeah, favorite episode of the first season.
Yeah, I think that's one I actually have to agree with because Project Loud House, it's surprising that this wasn't the first episode of the show because if it was, I think it would have done an amazing job of introducing us to the characters, how they behave, how Lincoln has to put up with all of the sister's shenanigans, how he fixes it. Something that is good. May not be one of my favorites, maybe top 10, but for an episode that should have been the first episode, it does quite a good job.
Right.
Okay, now for number two. My second favorite episode of season one is Cover Girls. And the reason for this is because I like an episode where the siblings have to like work together and get out of their situations. I like how the sisters cover for Lincoln and how he covers for them and how they keep on cosplaying each other throughout the entire episode was both funny and interesting. But again, I'd say the only thing that kind of bothered me in this episode was the ending where all of the siblings were humiliated. Not a bad ending, it's just not a good payoff for what I thought was a great episode. Everything else was great, but I think the ending should have just been at least a little bit tweaked a bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And minor spoiler, it's going to end up on my list later on, but yeah, it's a great episode. I'll give more of my opinion about that later, but yeah, I definitely agree with you. My number two for me is going to be a one that's also kind of a fan favorite, and that's Undie Pressure. And just like with Project Loud House, I like the plot line that it has here, where it's a plot line where the characters have like these bad habits, and they basically make a bet to be like, oh, who can last the longest about this. I liked how the progression of it went, and I definitely liked how the execution of it and how it all like came to the end, where what happened for like what happened. I thought it was enjoyable. I thought a lot of the humor worked for that episode. It definitely was a, and I also like how the majority of it was just set in one location. Like it just all in the living room, which we don't. I think it was one of the first. I think it was one of the few episodes in the entire first season that actually had that. I definitely liked how they managed to get a lot out of one just one area of the house, which I thought that was really good. I liked how the ending was, and it was also one of the episodes that kind of made me realize, oh, Lola's not actually a really crappy character, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't have a worse character on the show. I don't think there's even any characters I hate, but that was the episode that made me like, oh, I actually don't mind this character.
Yeah, Under Pressure is a good episode. And like what you said before, I realize that there's a lot of people out there that think, oh, Lola is a stupid and hateable character. But when you watch this episode and a few other episodes I'll get to later, she's not a bad character because even though she can be a brat, she does love her siblings enough and was nice to get Lincoln those undies.
Yeah, it'll definitely tie in later to when we talk about the characters where like they might kind of seem a little bit one dimensional, but like as the series goes on, they kind of like slowly develop in character. But again, it's a cartoon. It's not trying to be that. It's not trying to be the main focus.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to number three. And surprisingly enough, our number three spots are actually the same episode.
Uh huh. They are.
And that episode is called House Music. This is an episode that it was really surprising to see an episode that actually didn't entirely focus on Lincoln. This episode focuses on Luna, and the development that they gave her in this episode and the interactions with her family was really heartwarming. I really like to see episodes that focus more on the sisters and how they behave, and there was even an episode that explained more of Luna's backstory, and so you could kind of understand why she was acting like this. And it was good to see them bouncing off one another and the interactions and the humor. It was just a fun episode that I was glad to watch when it came out.
Yeah, this was definitely an episode that made me realize, yeah, Luna's one of my favorite characters. And we'll talk more about that in the characters list per se, because before then I was like, oh, she's kind of a background character that kind of occasionally brings some commentary. I definitely liked how this is an episode that focuses on a sister, and they managed to. I hope we get a little bit more episodes later on the seasons. I know we're probably not going to get a whole lot of them because this is mainly just more of Lincoln's show. But I definitely liked how it was telling the story in a little bit of a different way. And even though it was very predictable, I kind of already knew what was going to go on. I thought it was executed very well, and which I definitely liked how it all came together. And overall, it was a really nice episode. I definitely do have to agree with a lot of the points that you made about how the episode came together.
Yeah. Okay, so we're done with number three. I'll go on to number four now. My number four favorite episode is A Tattler's Tale. Because this was another, again, back to my point before about Lola and how a lot of people don't like her because of how she behaves. This was an episode that did a really good job of portraying Lola in the way that she was in that episode. And I liked seeing Lincoln and the sisters working together, trying to figure out how they can get out of their situation, and eventually ending up letting Lola join what they were doing at the beginning of the episode. I thought it was a really good character development for every single character, and the way it was handled was just really good. Like, this episode was actually a bit higher on the list, but I eventually decided to put it down just a little bit more because the episodes that are higher, I agree, are a lot better. But this episode, though, is still a very surprising take on Lola's character because, again, a lot of people don't like her, and this episode shows that she's not bad. The characters work off each other well, and I thought the story was really well developed for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, for what you were saying, Tyler's Tale, it's not going to make my list. It's an honorable mention for sure. I definitely still think it's a solid episode overall. I liked again what you said, how like they were developing Lola a little bit, and like they're not making her like oh like she's like this prissy little like girl that's like mean all the time. I liked how like the kind of like she learns a lesson in that, and I liked how it all came together. I thought it worked pretty well.
Yeah, so now for your number four.
My number four is your number two, and that's Cover Girls. And I'm going to keep this short because a lot of the points you made were already there. But yeah, this is overall a really, really good episode. I like the plot going on. At first I was kind of like I kind of know where this is going to go, but then it kind of like switches it up when like when then all the sisters have to try and like be like one of their one of each other. And I kind of liked how it was a little bit unpredictable how it played out, and I didn't mind the ending all that much. I kind of thought I didn't mind it all that much. The episode, the humor worked pretty well. I liked how the sisters were playing each other in certain ways, and I gotta admit the part where Lenny runs into Luann dressed as her and they're doing that little dance thing, that was just so funny. It really was.
Yeah, well, I already made my point, so I'm not really going to say much here. Okay, now for number five. Again, like number three, actually is the same episode. That episode is called Driving Miss Hazy. Now, this is an episode that I really thought did a really good job of developing Lenny's character because if you've watched the show, you know what Lenny's like. She's the dumb blonde and doesn't really know much. In this episode, I kind of like how Lincoln managed to see past her flaws and actually try to act like her and give her the languages that she understands to help her to help pass her driving test, and that even though she's not so bright, you can tell that she's still trying her absolute best to get her license. I will say though, I'd say the only thing about this episode I didn't like was the ending, because I really wanted Lenny to get her her driver's license. But then Lori just kind of sabotaged it. She didn't get her driver's license, but she at least acknowledged that she felt bad for what she did. So that is a plus, I guess.
Yeah, I basically have a lot of the same points as you, but I actually would argue that this is actually more of development for Lori than is Lenny because like at like the end she kind of like realizes like she basically confesses that oh I don't want Lenny to get a license because I want people to do things and if not then like I it makes more sense in my head. But I was trying to like say is that like she then gets this feeling where like she feels like no one will need her. Like oh like if people won't really like do things for me, then nobody really needs me to drive them around or something like that. So I definitely like how it developed. How like even though she's bossy to her siblings, she is afraid that they won't really need her anymore for certain things. I definitely like that. And again, what you said, I liked how they were developing Lenny a little bit. I thought the ending was fine. I liked how the episode was set up. Overall, really great episode. I have not much to complain.
Yeah. But anyway, even though there are some episodes that we love, despite the fact that we love the Loud House, there are episodes out there that are bad. So now it's time to get on to the worst episodes of season one, and some of these episodes pretty shit. Anyway, so let's move on to number one, my most hated episode, and actually your most hated episode of season one. It's the same episode, Making the Case. Oh boy, this is an episode I really, really hate the most. Like, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Now, first things first. I think these episodes. Now the majority of the episodes I have in this list, I think aren't terrible, but they're just kind of more bland, and I kind of feel like it's one of those episodes where like everyone just doesn't look good at all. And making the case is the prime example of that. This is an episode where everyone really just kind of isn't really all that great to each other. Like even Lincoln, where like he ends up like trying to win a trophy by basically embarrassing his sisters with these embarrassing videos. And then at the end, his best solution is to embarrass himself. And there's not much of a great outcome. I'm not exactly a fan of the moral there. I can understand why some people would like it, but it's overall one of those episodes where I'm like, yeah, I couldn't do without it. It's one of those episodes where just nobody looks good at all.
Yeah, this is an episode where I just hated everyone. Like, I'm surprised Lincoln didn't at first realize the consequences of uploading videos of embarrassing things that his sisters do, and nobody reminded of that. He didn't. He was talking to Luann, and she was all like, "You can't upload the videos without their permission," and then he just goes and does it anyway without even asking. Like, did he not
Well,
even
we wouldn't have
remember?
well, we wouldn't have an episode if that didn't happen. So there's that.
Ugh, what a miserable episode. Anyway, so now that's out of the way, let's get to my number two least favorite episode, which is It's a Four Times Loud House. Now, I have a lot of issues with this episode, to be honest, and the obvious issue I have is just how awful everyone is treating each other. Like in the episode I mentioned just before, they were just mad at Lincoln, but in this episode they're flat out beating the crap out of each other. And at the beginning of the episode, they just beat Lincoln up just because he found a quarter, and they all actually try to willing to beat each other up and blaming Lincoln for it just over money. Now I understand that a lot of money can make people go a bit crazy. I mean, SpongeBob kind of does that with Mr. Krabs, but still, this is family we're talking about. Everyone's hating each other and beating each other up just for money. And look, they do work together in the end, and that's all fine and good, but still, no one even felt bad that they injured each other or possibly got each other hurt. There are episodes out there they don't want to hurt each other, and now all of a sudden they are over money. Like, greed can hurt family, and that's what really makes this episode a real pain for me. And probably the worst part about this episode is the part where Luna just brutally kicks Lincoln out of her room with sonic waves. And look, a lot of people call Luna the nicest sister, but would the nicest sister do this? This was probably the most heartbreaking scene in the episode. This whole episode was just a complete train wreck.
Yeah, that's the thing is that I actually was rewatching this episode today, and I was like, "Oh wow, why didn't I put this on my list?" So I'm doing some rearranging for my list. It's not my number two. I have some other episodes for that, but yeah, I the thing is, I get that family like that kids like they don't really get the value of money. They think like, "Oh, it's mine." Like, yeah, I didn't really get it, and I also have to admit when they worked together at the end, it felt like it was just squeezed in right there because we got to throw in a moral because hey, it's the show. So I'll give more my opinion about that later in that list. So yeah, I for the most part I do agree with you.
Okay, so what about your number two least favorite?
Uh, Again, I'm looking through like the episode list because I do have a vague idea of what I had on here for my list, but for the sake of the video, for my number two, I'm gonna put intense debate, and the reason why is because this is probably like the most boring out of all the episodes. Where like I feel like it's an episode where like from the very beginning to the very end, I predicted where everything was gonna happen. Nothing interesting happened all that much and the overall outcome was just kind of like, whatever. It's an episode that I really could do without, and it's just, no, it's too painfully boring for me to really kind of go through again because there's just nothing to it at all. There really is nothing that all that memorable about it because everything is just so by the numbers about that episode. There's nothing really all that funny. I wasn't really huge on the moral of that episode. It's basically where like you shouldn't be greedy with your family members or something. I don't even freaking remember. But yeah, that episode was just no.
Yeah, I agree with you on intense debate. while I don't hate the episode as much as you do, I do see some slight positives in there. I will say, another issue I kind of had is that when they're trying to make Lincoln not vote for the other side, he ends up getting like really hurt, and they just seem like they don't care because he was being greedy, and I can understand, but it's just something that kind of I wanted to bring up. Alright. Anyway, so now, for my number three least favorite episode of season one is Sleuth or Consequences, and I think my hatred for this episode is quite obvious. I hated the sisters in this episode because for many reasons. A, they made fun of Lincoln when he was trying to go to his Ace Savvy convention. B, they outright blame him for clogging the toilet with no proof whatsoever. And C, they act all smug about it when they find out about the whole Princess Pony thing and will proceed to make fun of whoever did it for the rest of their life. It's just. Like, is this really family? Like, it's not as bad as it's the Four Times Loud House because at least they're not trying to hurt each other, but still, like, this is just painful to watch. And what's really weird in this episode is that even Lincoln's nicer sisters, as in someone like Luna or Lenny, even they act mean towards Lincoln. And you could argue they were also acting mean in making the case, but at least there was more of a reasonable reason to why they were. But here, they're just doing it for no reason, and it's really painful to watch, and it breaks my heart to see all this hatred and bullying just to one family member. It's really heartbreaking, and it's not even over money either.
So now I can see the inspiration for why you made that fanfic. So I got that. But yeah, my opinion about this, it actually is making my list. I'll talk about it later. I'll give more my opinion about that. For a lot of the points you did say, that is part of the reason why I didn't really like the episode. So for the most part, yeah, I do agree with you.
And yeah, what Andrew said, I actually made a fan fiction to this episode called Trustworthy. It's also not a sequel to this episode. It's also partly a sequel to episodes not even on this list, but also like a Four Times Loud House and another episode called The Sweet Spot. So if you want to read the fan fiction, it's in the link. Go check it out. It's awesome. A lot of people love it. You'll understand what I mean when you read it.
Yeah, so for my number three, I was doing some rearranging because some of the episodes he said he didn't like. I actually went back and watched them, and I kind of got why I wasn't really a fan of them. My number three is The Greenhouse, and the reason why is because if you're looking for an episode that's as much of like a whole message about we have to save the environment. This episode is that, and it's saving the environment for reasons that are kind of really selfish. Like Lincoln basically is saying, like, "Oh, you got to save energy on the house, or else these polar bears will die." And I'm like, "That's really all you're gonna give them?" And then in the end, he's just kind of like, "Well, I still have this whole video game thing that I want to do, but I still got to do this school project." You really plan to do the video game thing on the same week that you're trying to save energy on your house? I'm sorry. And at the end, I was like, well, you kind of got what you deserved. You're kind of being a crappy person to everybody. Like, you're basically saying, like, you can't do these things or else these polar bears will die, yet I'll do my thing because it's for some selfish reason. I don't know. So at the end, I was kind of like, yeah, you kind of got what you deserved. So it's really one of those episodes where I'm like, I could not do without it.
Yeah, and surprisingly enough, The Greenhouse is actually number four on my list. And all those
So
reasons you mentioned before, I pretty much agree with. Like, I think it's one of those episodes where I think Lincoln got what he deserved, but it's an episode where you can't do this kind of plot with a family as big as the Loud House. It doesn't work that way.
right. So, like, are you gonna like go into detail for like why you don't like this episode, or did I already
I
basically
think
explain
you
that to
already
you?
pretty much did that.
All right, so I guess I'll go into my number four, which is well, your number, your number two, and that's it's a loud house. And I'll be quick with this, and it's really one of those episodes where, again, just like with my number one, it's one of those episodes where nobody looks good at all. And I think it really over exaggerates the point about how kids are like, they don't know the value of money. They think like, oh, you found something, you got to split it and whatnot. And like, oh, I should have that. I thought it was way too exaggerated. It had a plot. The only reason why I'm not putting number two is because it had a plot line that at least was kind of interesting, but it just kind of blew it out of proportion. I didn't like how like everybody was just really nasty to each other, especially like the nicer characters on the show. And again, the ending just kind of felt like it was shoehorned in because we got to throw in a moral. So that's why that's my number four.
Yep, pretty much already stated those reasons. So on to my number five, which is Get the Message. Now, I actually originally had this episode a lot lower on my list. I think it was like at number seven, I believe. But after rewatching it, I have to be honest, I don't like this episode at all. Well, not at all. There was one part in this episode I liked, and that was the part where Lincoln was screaming to Laurie's phone, recording the message, and it was blocked out by Luna's music, and the reactions were just hilarious. But aside from that, everything else was just really, really bad. Like, it makes Laurie come across as a horrible character because she doesn't seem to care about what happens to Lincoln. In fact, speaking of which, I also did a fan fiction sequel to this episode. It's called Careful or Careless. The link will be in the description. Go check it out. It's another good episode that I wanted to develop with Laurie's character. But back to this episode, she acts like she doesn't care about him. And what's really weird is that this episode came out after Left in the Dark. And in that episode, Laurie felt sympathetic for Lincoln, and she apologized in a very sympathetic way. But then in this episode, she's like, "Hey, I'm sorry for breaking it. Here's another stupid gaming system." It makes no sense. Like, you could argue the episodes aren't in the right order, but you can't pack them in together the same episode. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
To be honest, this is one of those episodes I actually don't mind. But to say what you say, probably the part I don't like at all about this episode is Lori. But that's also more because she's one of those characters I kind of have complicated issues with, where I like her, but I'm also, but that's something for another video. But overall, I actually didn't mind this episode. I thought the plot line, it had something cool to it. I liked, again, the part where Lincoln was like screaming into the phone and was being censored, the reactions. I thought that was pretty good. I like the progression of this episode. Again, I didn't like Lori at all in this episode. It's not bad as an episode. I can see why you don't like it, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, do you want to do your number five least favorite now?
My number five is actually going to be pretty quick, and it's one you already have, and that's Sleuth or Consequences. The reason why it's not higher on this list is because I think this is overall, it's an episode that got me to like Lucy a little bit more. I already liked Lucy before because I thought her whole gag of like just sneaking up on her family, I thought that was funny, even if it got kind of tiresome. But I thought this was an episode that did some decent development with her. I mean, the whole thing where like, oh, the pony book was hers, I wasn't surprised at all because I feel like this was something that was played out in other shows. I think Teen Titans Go did something about this, where like Raven like secretly likes ponies or something. I'm not sure. I liked how that was. The reason why it's on this list is because again, it's boring and none of the characters. And I think it's one of those episodes where the majority of the characters are not put in a good light at all. So, and it's also just a forgettable one. I just don't care about this episode at all.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing I forgot to mention about this episode. I actually kind of liked the bond between Lincoln and Lucy in this episode. I thought it did a good job developing her character. I mean, I like Lucy, don't get me wrong, but I think this episode made me like her just a little bit more.
Right.
Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's do the probably one of the hardest ones to do, the top five favorite characters. Now, for this one, maybe you should go first, and then I'll go after you.
Okay. To be honest, this one was actually this one was actually kind of difficult because you have 11 characters, main characters in this show, and it's kind of difficult to see like it. There's no bad one, but it's kind of hard to pick one that's like a favorite overall from like all the characters because they all have personality. Like the episodes manage to get them a good amount of character depth to them and explore them a little bit more. So for me, picking a favorite, it's really just more just like I enjoy the character overall. And for mine, this might come as a little bit of surprise, but my number one for me is Luna. And the reason why is because the two episodes that are mostly where they have like she's a bit of more of a focus, like on house music and for Bros About to Rock, which the latter was actually an honorable mention for my favorite. It just missed the cut. But the reason why I like her character is I always enjoy characters that have like a wild personality to them, but also deep down they kind of have like a heart of gold. They're kind of like, you're wild, a bit reckless, but you do care about others around you. You do care about those that are close to you. I think out of all the voice acting, she has like the best out of all the costume designs, except for Luann. I think she has like the best costume design. I also like the little gag where like she references songs from like previous years and whatnot. And I think that she's also one of those characters when like used correctly, she can be great for the story. I mean, it's no surprise why House Music was like the first episode to mainly focus on one sister. So yeah, I think she's great. She's my favorite, and it's a bit of a toss up because there's other characters where I'm like I might switch them up as the series progresses. But as it is, yeah, Luna's my favorite.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that, and I'll have further thoughts about Luna later on in my list. But for right now, my number one favorite character, surprisingly, is Lincoln. And I know some people will probably disagree with me on that because I know there were the episodes we just mentioned that portray Lincoln in a jerkish manner. But when you really get past that, since he's the only boy in the family aside from the dad, he's a very sympathetic character as well. He's one that I can definitely relate with. And again, even though he does do some stupid things, I always like how he tries to help his sisters out and make peace with them. And it's just, I know he's not perfect, but in terms of the show, it's great to see him doing all these things for his sisters and ultimately loving them in the end and getting past their flaws. And even though he has his flaws, he always makes up for it, which is something some characters in other shows don't usually do.
I'll have more of my opinion about Lincoln later because he actually does make my list. I have like a lot of the stuff you said I did have, but I also have more things to say about the character. But yeah, a lot of that stuff I can agree with you on. So my number two, because again I'm going next,
Actually,
right?
our number two is actually the same character.
Right. Right, and that character is Lenny, which I'll go into my details first about what I like about her, which I'm pretty sure you'll agree on. I think out of all the characters, she's the funniest. I mean, the whole stereotype of she's a dumb blonde, it's been done so many times, it's hard to keep count of. The reason why I like her character the most is because for the dumb moments that she has, they're almost on the level of being kind of really clever. Like take for example the episode that was with the spider, like when Lisa was like you're lactose intolerant, and she's like no I'm not. I'm tolerant of all people, whether they lactose or not. I'm like okay, that's like a dumb blonde joke that's actually kind of clever. I like those moments. I like the design of her. I like the voice acting. And I think out of all the characters, she's definitely one of the more sympathetic ones, and the ones where it's like, oh, she does care. Like she's definitely the nicest character out of everybody. If we're putting it out of everybody in the family, so, and she's the most enjoyable. It's like one of those episodes where like I can agree why a lot of people love this character so much. It's because she's enjoyable. She just she's kind of a scene stealer.
Yeah, those reasons are reasons I obviously have to agree with you on. And like I said before, I also like how most of the family is annoyed by her antics, but Lincoln's the only one who can see past her flaws. And honestly, out of all the sisters Lincoln has a relationship with, I think Lenny might be one of the best ones he's had. I mean, imagine, I don't know if there will ever be an episode where Lincoln has to be faced with the question of who his favorite sister is. In fact, I actually did another fan fiction about that. I keep promoting fan fictions a lot. Anyway, but
Fan fiction plugin, obvious.
yeah, pretty much. Forgive me for my voice. I'm just recovering from a cold. But yeah. So I pretty much agree with you entirely on Lenny's character. She's a character that's really enjoyable, and I'm glad she was portrayed the way she was because when it comes to Nickelodeon, they always do stupid characters that I hate, but this show manages to make me love a dumb character, and that's an achievement in of itself.
Yeah, for sure. For my number three is also another character who's also become a bit of a fan favorite, and that's Luann. Now, Luann was one of those characters where I kind of didn't really like her at first because I was like the whole thing where she tells bad puns. I'm like, I don't know how long this is gonna last, but I kind of like looked past that. I saw more of her character, and I was like, oh, she's just a really adorable girl, and I was like, I actually really like this character. And I think the episodes where like I think she's one of those characters where if she's used in the right moments, she can be really well used. And I think the puns that she has, I actually don't really mind them all that much. I mean, I don't really think they're all that great, but I think for the right setting, if they're not overused, they work really well. And I like the character design that she has. It definitely fits with the character, and I think she definitely ends up being like the best part of that April Fool's episode. she easily ends up being the best part of that. Which that episode was probably a dishonorable mention for like my worst. But yeah, I think she ends up being a great character overall, and I can definitely see why a lot of people really love her.
Yeah, and I'll get into more details about why I love Luann later on in the list. Spoiler alert, she's on the list, won't say where she's at. But anyway, my number three is actually the same as your number one, which is Luna. Now, of course, you already stated the reasons why you love Luna, but again, I just love her character. I'm into those characters that love music, very passionate about it, very energetic, and also I know a lot of people say that she's one of Lincoln's nicest sisters. She's not entirely the nicest, but I really like those episodes, especially that for Bros About to Rock episode where she was determined to make his first concert his most memorable one, and it really does show that those two do have a very good relationship. And again, really like all the references that she makes in every episode. If I'm gonna be completely honest though, the one trait I kind of don't like about Luna is when she does her British accent. Now I know that's supposed to be played for laughs, but at times it can get a little bit cringeworthy. But it's not awful, it's just a little bit cringeworthy, and that's why she's probably lower than the first two characters I mentioned.
Yeah, going back to that British accent thing, I only really picked up on that on Undie Pressure, and that's just kind of like one of those things I'm just kind of whatever about. But yeah, I definitely a lot of the points you made, I definitely do like. And for Bros About to Rock, like it's just was like, oh, the like she ruined her concerts and everything. I think all she was like trying to do is just like make them better for everybody else. And I think like when you go into like why she was all into that, it's like, oh, it really does make sense. She's a really good character. So yeah, pretty much that.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so do you want to get to your number four?
My number four character for me is another fan favorite, and that's Lucy. And the reason why I don't have her higher on this list, like so many of whom might, is because the goth character thing has been played out so much that I'm just kind of like, if I put this at like a super high list, it's almost like I'm just not really into originality when it comes to characters. But the reason why I put her on this list is I think, just like with Lenny, she has some of the best humorous moments in this show. Like the whole thing where she sneaks up on everybody out of nowhere. It's used to the right amount of moments where it never feels boring. I think they're used at moments where it works humorously for like the situation that's going on. Her design, I like the design that she has. Again, she ends up being the best part of Sleuth or Consequences, and overall, she's an enjoyable character. She's used in the right amount of moments, and again, the only reason why she's not higher is because the whole character type has just been played out so much that it just, I don't know, wouldn't be fair.
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, so on to my number four is Luann, and again, I pretty much have the same reasons that you do because again, I usually like all the puns she makes and all of the jokes that she does, and I definitely love her costume design. And there was one episode of her that I really enjoyed, which was I think it was called Funny Business. It was a redeemable episode, which I'm gonna be completely honest, I did not like that April Fool's episode. I know you did, but I personally did not like that episode. It was the only time where I kind of didn't like Luann for how her jokes were a bit over the top. But anyway, despite that, I still really enjoy her character as a whole. I love the voice acting, I love her design, I love the costume design that she always does, and of course, I love her jokes. So that's a lot of things to say.
Yeah, like again, I don't really like that April Fool's episode. The only reason why it didn't make the list is because I like the ending of it is used pretty well. It's like it's not the best introduction episode for her, but I still didn't mind it. And that funny business episode again, she's easily the best part of it because I like the moral that it has for it. So yeah, pretty much a lot of the same stuff you said about I said about her and you said we basically have the same thoughts about her.
Yeah,
My number five is your number one, and that's Lincoln. And the reason why he's not number one is because I think out of all the characters in the family, he doesn't have as much personality as everybody else. The reason why he's not higher up is because I just kind of see him more as like, oh, he's the everyman kind of thing. The reason why he makes this list though is because out of everybody, I think he's probably the most relatable. Yes, even more than my number one, I think he ends up being a character where like any male tween preteen growing up, it's like some of the things like he does, like oh, I can relate to that. Like reading comic books or like eating foods that kind of seem bizarre a little bit. Like I have like a whole collection of comic books that I've been collecting since I was like probably eight or so. I can relate to a lot of the stuff that he kind of goes through, and since I did grow up in a family with siblings, I can kind of relate to some of the struggles that he does go through. I grew up with two brothers. It was not always pleasant, but I still love them. So yeah, I think out of all the characters, he's the most relatable. Only reason why he's not higher is because he's not as larger than life as a personality as everybody else. But I think he's still really enjoyable.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And for my number five favorite character is the same as your number four, which is Lucy. Again, I'm not going to go too much into it because you already stated plenty of the reasons. Not the reason why she's not higher is just because we've kind of seen that trait over and over again. But she's still an enjoyable character. I love her design. I love her voice. And again, she was the best part of Sleuth or Consequences. And her humor is really funny. I love how she always sneaks up on people and scaring them. And while her traits do get a little bit old, she's ultimately still an enjoyable character on the show, at least.
Yeah, pretty much everything. Yeah, that's really why Lucy was for me my number four.
Okay, so before we end this video, we're gonna do one more quick part, which is what kind of episodes would we want to see in season two? Because season two is started, and I suppose we'd like to talk a bit about what episodes we'd like to see for season two.
Okay.
So, again, all my fan fictions, I'd love to see some of them appear in season two. Of course, some of them are a bit too dark for a kids show, but definitely ones like Trustworthy or Who Is It or Careful or Careless. I'd love to see some of those fan fictions or any fan fiction ideas that people have turn into episodes because I hear season two is going to put more development on the backstories of the sisters and how they are today. So that's something I definitely want to see in season two.
Yeah, I definitely would be curious to see that because I think the one thing that could actually make the show like stand out a little bit more and actually maybe stick around a little bit longer is if they develop the characters because I kind of feel like you can't do a whole SpongeBob or Fairy Odd Parents thing where everybody stays the same age, everybody just does the same thing because oh it's a cartoon we can do that. Every other cartoon does that, and even some of them are like actually trying to develop them. I would actually like to see that with the Loud House.
Yeah, definitely. And I still don't want to see the Loud House go the same way that SpongeBob does, but as long as the show stays great and as long as season 2 still does good, the show will still be one of my favorite Nickelodeon shows of all time and one show I will always definitely check out more episodes when they come out. Nickelodeon, I'm excited for season 2. Don't disappoint me. Anyway, that's all we have to say for season 1. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Do you have anything else to say?
I just want to thank you for letting me be a part of this. I had a lot of fun, and it was great talking about this show. I finally got all of this off my chest.
So anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to me and go to subscribe to Andrew's YouTube channel unless you want to.
Well,
Yeah, what?
I was gonna say like it's probably best you don't subscribe to my channel because I'm like in development right now, like come up with like some new stuff for my channel. So probably the next time like me and Yoshi ever do a video together, I'll be like, yeah, subscribe to my channel because I have everything put together. So probably not right now.
Alright, that's fine. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching guys, and this is Yoshi Player and Andrew, signing off. Bye!